Oh, goodness. Well, one new thing that I learned today is that what's old is new. We have a button called camera control on the iPhone 16 generation. And you think of it as something akin to the shutter button on a DSLR camera for you photography enthusiasts out there. Very simply, if you're holding the iPhone 16 in your hand and you see something, you're desperate to take a photograph, bam, hit the camera control button, camera comes up. But don't worry, Tim, you don't need to turn your hand or readjust or turn the screen. Boom, just hit the button again and it takes a photo. This is groundbreaking innovation.
Is this enough?
But as you guys know,
is this enough, Ed?
Report.
Yeah. Is this enough to get people to buy the iPhone 16 to upgrade from the 15 or the 14 or, like me, the lowly 13?
Joking aside, as I've heard them talk about camera control, it actually sounds like an awesome idea, and I can't wait to get my hands on and test it. But it probably isn't enough. And so you need to separate the hardware story from the software story. And when I say software, I mean AI. And so these are not substantive hardware upgrades from the prior generation iPhone 15, although there is some improvement to the capabilities of the processor in the base 16. What they're talking about in real time, because the event's ongoing, obviously, is why we need Apple Intelligence, their AI suite, in our lives. And very simple summary is that it basically improves the tasks that we already do on our phones each day, makes them more efficient, easier to do, rather than being some kind of wholesale change to how we interact with our mobile phones.
Just very briefly on the camera, Tim, you've met my husband.
Joe.
His name is Joe. He's a big
photographer, a real photographer.
Yeah, he actually switched from the Android to the Apple a couple of years ago just because of the camera. But
wow.
Ed, to your point, I don't know if this is enough. It's very cool, but I don't know if it's enough to sort of pull forward that upgrade cycle. I mean, talk to us a little bit more about the software, though, about Apple Intelligence, because the narrative is out there that Apple is kind of behind where they should be when it comes to AI, and of course this arms race that's underway among all the big tech companies. How far does this event go, if at all, in dispelling that storyline?
Well, the most important piece of news, I suppose, so far is that it will start rolling out in October, which confirms Bloomberg's existing reporting. And so then think about chronology of events. We'll get the full details of the handsets themselves today. They'll start shipping probably by the end of September, and you won't get access to Apple Intelligence until next month. So it's actually a slight delay in terms of like, well, hold on, I just got a new phone, but I don't yet have access to those tools. But the thing I re-emphasized, and I think I just did a post in the blog that they'll put out soon, is that this isn't sort of a new functionality. A lot of what they outlined, be it photo-related or task-related, drafting of an email, reviewing information, it's just a sort of more automated way of doing things we already do, rather than some new brilliant function or task that generative AI has brought us through the handset. But again, Apple being Apple, super heavy emphasis on privacy, data security. That's something they always go back and lean into because they feel they're in a strong position there and they have a great track record.
Maybe that's a good segue to talk about some of the health features that were announced today in Cupertino, Ed.
Sure.
Give us an idea from a health perspective, not just when it comes to sleep apnea, but also what we heard about audio and ear health in the new AirPods lineup.
Yeah, so sleep apnea starting with Apple Watch Series 10, pending FDA approval, but it's close. A really interesting piece of technology. We don't need to, the three of us, go into our sleeping habits, but sleep apnea is a real thing. Many people listening to the program will have loved ones that have some sort of degree of sleep apnea. I know people that have had strokes as a result of sleep apnea. And I can tell you that inside the Steve Jobs Theatre, when they confirmed that function, there was real engagement with the audience. This is part of the Apple story about wanting to get into more healthcare services. And very similarly with the current or next generation of AirPods being used as a sort of hearing aid device. They gave the example in the presentation of a woman who was hard of hearing and her son speaking to her at a special event and saying, like, this is why you're so important to us, and using the sort of audio experience of normal hearing versus amplified hearing using the AirPods. New territory in some sense for Apple, but again confirms Bloomberg Mark Gurman's reporting.